Hi, I'm Stuart Clark, the Managing Director of Russell & Russell.
And I'm Yvonne Webb of Action Coach Business Coaching. And together we are your co-hosts and sponsors of Glasgow Business Stories. We hope you're loving Glasgow Business Stories. So if you are, please do us a favour and subscribe. New episodes drop every 2 weeks, and we want you to hear all the wonderful stories from the businesses here in Glasgow. So please subscribe now. Andrew, welcome. Thank you for coming on Glasgow Business Stories.
Nice to see you.
Good to see you. So you're a well-kent person in Glasgow, but take us back to where your business began and how you've gotten to where you are today.
Sure. So my business started in 2012, but probably to tell you how I got there, I probably need to start before that. So I've been kind of telling a little bit of a newer story recently because, you know, I think it's easy to often start with where the business starts exactly, but sometimes it's where you started to get you to that moment. So I had quite a unique entry point into life. And basically, while I was in the womb, right, my birth mum took mentally unwell, and she decided to try and take both her life and my life and jump out the hospital window. Amazingly, I'm here, right? So I survived, she survived. But at 30 days old, I was born Stephen Jakes, so not Andrew Dobbie, and not many people know that because I've only told this story a few times. And basically at 30 days, I was adopted into a great family, a wee collection of people called the Dobbies. Well, they're all from different families, so we're just a wee group of people put together. And what makes it even sort of luckier for me was that my adopted mum, she's called Maureen, and she's like 3% hearing in this year, 7% hearing in that year. And she single-handedly brought us all up. And I learned so much in hindsight now about business from watching my mum do that with us and learning all about resilience and learning all about not letting what you're given in life stop you get to where you want to be. So you didn't know I was going to tell that story, but I don't usually tell that, and it's usually, but I do think now it's been a lot of what's formed me to get to where I've got to. And so yeah, my mum's she's like my hero, and what's quite nice as well is that because I was adopted at birth, I was always, when I grew up, I'd never actually seen someone that looked like me, right? And I was always like looking at my friends and I was like, oh, you look like your mum, or you look like your sister, you look like your dad. And I was always kind of looking around for someone that looked like me, and I'd never had that. And so I was always kind of keen to figure, or to meet someone, you know, in a blood relative. And it's always made me really interested as well as, do you get what you've got from nature or from nurture, from the environment you get brought up in? Now, as I say, I was lucky because I was brought up in a loving family. So my mum then spotted creativity in me. And so from as early as I remember, when I was in primary school, she would bring home colouring in competitions, and she would, you know, spend all this time getting me to do that. And that's obviously led me all the way to where I am in MadeBrave. And when I was 18, I moved to Glasgow. And I worked for Paul McStay, who was the ex-Scotland football captain, Celtic football captain. I know nothing about football, right? I've got to proclaim, but and I think that Paul maybe liked that about me because I didn't treat him hugely differently. You know, it was just Paul to me. But Paul's a really amazing guy, and I worked for Paul for 8 years in a little business called Midtjie Creations, and it was a little design agency. Paul had just finished playing professional football. And so it was his business, but I was the designer there. And that business grew to about 8 or 10 people. And basically, when I'm trying to think now, when I was just coming up to 30, basically my wife became pregnant with my son, Finn. And it was the kind of driver for me to start my business. So I hadn't, you know, in the family I grew up with, I hadn't had a lot of money, single parent. My mum was a nurse. And so the driver for me was shit, I'm going to have a baby. My wife was going to stop working, and it was literally money driven. So when Finn was 2 weeks old, I had my last wage, which was about $1,000. And I thought, what a bloody good time to leave your job and start a business. And a really nice sort of closing the loop of my first story is around the same time, my birth mum, she'd been unwell since birth, and been in hospital, etc. But she had reached out, and different members of my family, my birth auntie, I'd managed to go and meet them, and I learned that I had a brother. And my brother is a guy called Ryan O'Rourke, and Ryan, we met each other, and he'd grown up in Edinburgh. And I was like, what do you do? And he's like, well, I'm an entrepreneur. I'm just about to start a business. And I was like, oh, I'm just starting a business. I'm starting a branding business. And I was like, I'll brand your business. And so his business was a business called flavorly.com. And you might have heard of it. He ended up on Dragon's Den. He was the sort of biggest, well, in fact, cool side story, right?
Yeah.
Side story here, right? So he goes on Dragon's Den and does his pitch for flavorly.com, and he gets 4 dragons that offer him the money, and one of them said, I'll offer you a job, I want to hire you right now. And on screen he took the money, and it was the usual, I can't remember the exact amount, but let's say 60, 70 grand for 25, 30% or something. Behind the scenes he got the contract and was like, oh my God, you get no time with them, nothing. And it airs a year later. So when it aired a year later, at the time, when it went live on TV, he put a mailer out to his mailing list and said, I don't want to take the dragon's money. I want you all to be my dragon. And he raised, I think it was 560 grand for 8%. So anyway, his business ended up growing to be one of the biggest e-commerce beer subscription brands in the UK. MadeBrave went on to grow, and here I am today.
Amazing. Now, I'm not quite sure even what to ask next. Firstly, go Maureen. Sounds like you've got an amazing mum.
She's great, yeah. Uh-huh.
And are your siblings all adopted as well?
Yeah, so my brother Alistair, my sister Fiona, we're all from different families. They've never went down the route of meeting their birth families. It's not for everyone. Everyone has a different point of view with it. I was just always keen to, as I say, see people that, had the same DNA as me and but they're not. And it doesn't, for anyone listening that is adopted or has adopted children, I think it's different for every case. And, I've been lucky again, in terms of my adopted family. I've been like a real now new extended family, but they don't take over my original family, if that makes sense. So, yeah.
And you're saying about nature and nurture, do you think, your brother being an entrepreneur as well, do you think
yeah,
you're like that as part of nature, but then
that's
the nurture
kind of
as
we
well?
were kind of like, oh, you're an entrepreneur. And then I was like, so my granddad and grandmum, so my grandmum's an artist and he's an architect.
Okay.
And I'm like, right, okay. And so, but I'm like, right, okay, they've got that. And so, yeah, I think there's maybe a bit of both, right? I think it's important, it's hugely important how you're nurtured, right? Because obviously you can have the greatest genes in the world, and if you're put in a bad environment, there's probably a great chance that you're not going to do great things. So I was quite lucky. I've had some creative genes in terms of the path that I was going to go on, but then luckily Maureen, my mum, spotted them in me.
And you're, sorry.
I was just interested, does Ryan look like you? Because you said you're always looking for somebody
Yeah,
look like you.
He's got a different dad, and we've got the same birth mum. So if you imagine, she got better at one point, had another child. So we've got the same birth mum, different fathers, but we're now like best friends. Like we're literally on the phone before I came in here. We talk every day, constantly, just phone calls, talking about crazy business ideas and bouncing off each other. And we've just been on a couple of trips. We went to China, that last November, December there, and we were in New York last year. So it's just great. We're getting to create all these experiences that we didn't get to, earlier on in life. But we don't feel like we've missed out, because it's like we've got a great relationship now, and yeah, it's been really fulfilling.
Amazing. And you're saying the decision to start the business was money driven, but you also got a 2-week-old baby, and a lot of people would go, actually,
I know
with money driven, I'd take the security of a job and the regular paycheck. What was it that made you take that?
Yeah, I know. I do look in hindsight and go, that was kind of naive, wasn't it?
Well, if I turned to my wife and said 2 weeks, oh, by the way, was it something you'd talked about beforehand, and it just happened to be that you decided to make that, or was it just like... Do
you know what it was? I think it was really money driven, was true at the beginning, because I was skint. I didn't have, I think I might have been on 23, 24 grand at the time. And I was looking at it, and my wife wasn't going to be working, and nappies and childcare and all that stuff's expensive. And then the really powerful thing was, I had a friend, Rob, who's a good friend of mine, and he said 4 words to me that I think are some of the most powerful words in the world. If someone said it to you, and he said, I believe in you. And I think belief is a really powerful thing, that when you give it to someone, when you give someone that feeling of belief gives you confidence. And when you've got confidence, you feel brave, and you can do stuff you never thought you could do. And it kind of that gave me that confidence. And I jumped out and I thought, right, I just need to earn money, whatever I need to do here. And I was a designer and a photographer. That's me holding a camera, by the way. My hand went into a claw there. A designer and a photographer. And so I thought, right, okay, I'm going to be around babies. So I did baby photography. I'd sort of seen the niche in America, where they bundle them up in little babies, make them look all cute. And I hadn't really seen anyone doing it in the UK. So I thought, I'll do that. So me and my wife started doing baby photography. It's a nightmare because babies don't stick to your schedule, as we all know. I did wedding photography. So I think I did 8 or 9 weddings in the first year. That's also a nightmare if anyone's ever tried to schedule a wedding, etc. But no, I did okay at that. And at the same time, I started doing graphic design, all the I suppose the skills that I had. And I was doing all 3. Super stressful. First year of any business is mega stressful. But I realised actually I quite enjoyed the business side of it. So when I got into conversation, I realised I could actually solve people's problems using creativity. And but then I was at home at night, and my wife was like, "Here's Finn," and I'm like, oh. And so I was like stress headaches, knackered. But I think I went from in the first year, me to 6 full-time employees, and I hadn't borrowed any money. That was from that £1,000 start. And I think that getting from you to team is usually the hardest piece, right? For a lot of people that I speak to anyway. And I always like to share the story of it because I think it helps when people hear it, is that, so I was busy, and I was sitting across from another designer, a guy called Graham, way better designer than me. And he was kind of jaded with having been a freelancer and people not paying bills. And he was going to join the police. And I said, well, why don't you work for me? And he said, Andrew, I've got a family, I've got kids, I need at least 30 grand. And I was kind of like, shit, I don't have 30 grand. But I think at that point, I'd saved £7,000-8,000 or something, squirreled that away. And I realized that, well, when you hire someone, you've got a 3-month probation period. And so often people, when they go to hire, they think of the risk of the 12 months. I looked at the 3 months and went, well, a 30 grand salary, it's about 2.5 grand a month. So the risk's about 7.5 grand. And if it all goes wrong, you've got a parachute cord. You don't want to use it, but and I said to Graham, look, this is the case. Let's try this. And so I hired Graham, did the same thing again, put my head up at the end of the year and there was 6 people, put my head up at the end of year 2, there was 16. And then it just kind of went from there. And I'd like to say I knew what I was doing, but that first and second year, I couldn't even read a balance sheet, and that'll, a profit and loss. What was that? What's that? And I remember my accountant saying, Andrew, you do realise that that's not your money. And, and I was like, all right.
So you started off doing all these 3 different things. When you took Graham on, was that you started to niche into? Yeah,
I very quickly got rid of those 2. And basically at that point, I suppose I'd been a graphic designer, creative director. So I started to hire more of me, clones of me, if you like, similar skill sets.
And did that then allow you to go and win more work to cover their salary costs? Yeah. Effectively freed up your time to go and win more business?
I suppose I started, scaling people around me that did the same things. Now that's not, you don't want to keep doing that. You need to find complementary skill sets and teams, of course, right? But that was kind of the first move. Then I started, office manager, account managers. Well, I can't remember the exact order of everything right now. But what I think allowed me to scale in that second year was that I separated the service offering of what we were doing, and I separated growing the brand. And I was really lucky because I hired a great creative director who's still with me now. And I said, Stephen, the studio is now yours. The output of the agency is yours to own and lead and build. And I'm going to grow and lead a brand. And that put me back in a creative position, if you like, because then I could use my creativity to how I'm going to grow the brand, how I'm going to lead the company. And Stephen would then do that. And then I hired an operations manager that could then run the business underneath as well. So, I think landing on those 3 roles quite early was one of the benefits, because I think when I've seen anyone try to scale creative businesses, they often fail or can't get above a plateau is because they want to lead the company and do the creative work. you know,
they become the bottleneck.
Yeah, and it's like, it's impossible in terms of your capacity and brain and stress and all the things that, you know, to do it well, I think.
And where did the name come from? And when did you become MadeBrave? Did you start as that?
No, I just started as Andrew Dobbie, freelance design and photography. I was like, if I just
snappy.
Name it, people might find me like that. And very quickly I realised, it was only after a few months, I realised that I need something to scale beyond. And I think a name has great power as well, you know. I think it's one thing people can overlook, but I think if you get the right one, it can bring so much. So I knew the power of that, and the real story of it was I was away with my friend who's a copywriter and my wife. We were away for a weekend, and we thought, let's just brainstorm this whole weekend. And we were just really hard if you've ever tried to name anything. It's much easier now with ChatGPT, I tell you. We're spoiled now. You can now give me 1,000 names, give me 10,000 names and make them better. But it's one of the hardest things. And I was wearing a Diesel t-shirt and it said "Only the Brave" on it. And my wife said, "What about Brave?" And I was like, "Oh, I love Brave." But I was like, I don't want it to be Braveheart. I don't want it to be Scottish, you know, like ambition here is to think of a brand that can go anywhere. And so that night I was like, the word brave is good, because who doesn't want to be brave? You know, it's such a strong word. And I just like, I am brave, we are brave, this is brave, made brave. And I went down in the morning, I was like, Audrey, made brave. She's like, stop, you've done. And I went online and all the domains were there, all the social was there. No one had ever put those two words together, weirdly, at that time. It was like Google, 0 results. And I thought, that's it. And when you've got a name like that, it's got power, because you can talk about adrenaline, braveness, boldness. You know, I've got endless themes, and bravery looks different to every person. For some people, it's stepping out the door in the morning. For some people, it's standing on stage, and some people it's, you know, so you've got endless themes and stories. And I think if you get a good name, it gives you that.
For some people, it's starting a business with a 2-week-old.
Exactly. So it ties into the story perfectly as well. So, you know, like, you know, yeah. So, and I think that's it as well, is like, for anyone starting a business right now, if you can get the name plus a story very repeatable and shareable, you know, because it's easy, like my story, you can share it with, you had £1,000, a 2-week-old baby, you're done. And they turned it into a circus, or, you know, like, you know, most people overcomplicate it all, but you need to try and get your name, your story down to the most repeatable, simplest way you can get it to.
It's interesting because I think a lot of business people, if I were to say, who am I talking about, £1,000, 2-week-old baby, they would lead it straight back to you, because you've done a good job of getting your message and your story out there already. Yeah, and it's like, I'm bored of it, right? So much, because I've said it so many times, but you've kind of got to do that, because you know, it doesn't, you think when you've said it once, everyone's heard it. They've not. Most people scroll past your stuff, or they see a tiny bit, or even if they're listening to you on a podcast or a talk, they're distracted. So you've kind of got to keep going and going and going. And I think over time, you know, as humans, when we're on podcasts or we've got things, you've got a collection of stories that you generally tell. You know, you even asked me the question today, like, how many, you know, what stories could we talk about, etc. And I think you're just trying to find the ones that form your story for what you need them to use them for at that time, if that makes sense. Now, what I mean by that is, I remember being younger and going, well, what's my story? You know, and I had no idea where to start with it. And again, when I see younger entrepreneurs or people starting out, they're like, I don't have a story. But your story could start wherever you want. You know, for all of these years since the beginning of MadeBrave, I was only telling my story from the 30-year-old to now part, and I didn't feel comfortable to tell my birth story. And I'm only now telling that story because I believe it's actually got more power in it than the latter story. And I think if you're trying to shape your own story, well, it could start today. It could be, I heard a podcast, I heard Andrew say this, it set me off on a path, and then I did that. There's also a great tool, if you search online, it's called Wait But Why Life Planner. You should look this up. It's a blank sheet of paper, and it's got 52 little boxes right across in a line, and that's your your year in boxes, and then it repeats it 90 pages down. You've seen it?
Fill in the dot every time a week passes, so you can see how long you got left.
Or you can mark things. You can go, right, here's something I want to do in the future, mark that. Or I've seen people like scoring out past in it, like things that are dark in their life. And it's a really good tool though to go, okay, plot that out, and then you can decide which are the chapters that you want to tell in your story, because you don't have to tell them all. It's up to you. It's your story, and you decide.
How does that, you're building a personal brand, but you've also got the company brand really strong, like they're obviously interlinked, but how do you know, if someone comes to you then going, I want you to work on...
That is the tough thing. If you've got the answer for that, then tell me, because that is the challenge, right? Because I think we all know now that companies that do have personal brands attached to them grow faster, or they seem to, and if you look at, we've all seen the visualizations on LinkedIn where you see Apple and then you see Steve Jobs, and Apple will have like 10 million followers, Steve Jobs will have 90 million. The ratio is always like that. And it's even the same for MadeBrave on LinkedIn. My following is more than the company. And so it is a challenge. But I think it's more powerful having it than not having it. So I think I would always say to people, if you can do it, try and do it. What I try to do now though is try and scale it so it's not just me in the company. And I think a younger, naive me, you go, can't put everyone up. And you see people doing that. You can't put everyone, because people will pinch them. But I think the better thing to do is almost try and create a squad of people that are interested in telling their stories and comfortable and confident. And if you can do that with a whole team, you've then got ambassadors, you've got people, and they're all going to, grow confidently. The company's going to grow. So yeah, I think the trick is you could use the one person as a catalyst, but very quickly try and disperse it into a team. And ultimately, really, that's a lot about what we do when we brand even big companies is, we often go in at very large scales now to brand organizations. And usually, I talked about belief earlier on that I had the belief to start MadeBrave. Well, companies and businesses are really they're just a shared belief, right? Because they don't really exist if you think about it. They're made up in our head, and they're built around a story that we all believe in. And then we all use that shared belief to give us confidence, to be brave, to go and do things. And that's often what we do in companies. We're going in to hear what's already there. We're the outsiders that are able to spot it, bring it together as a story. And it's the same as building that life planner. You're trying to build a company's story, and then you're trying to create alignment with a whole team, not just one person, not just the CEO, so that the whole company moves together as one. And all we're really doing when we brand it is wrapping that in a layer of creativity, visual identity, and facade. But the real power and magic is in the belief system that sits underneath it. Did that make sense?
It did. It did. And I'm interested in bring that to life for us then, and some of the work that you've done, because I know you've had some fabulous campaigns recently. I don't know of any not so fabulous ones, but tell us about how you've actually brought that to the forefront for the company.
Yeah, we've got we've just finished at the moment rebranding First Bus for the whole of the UK. So if you imagine First Bus operate all the buses right across the UK, and if you imagine a company of that scale, they've got thousands of employees right across the UK, and over time they've acquired lots of different bus companies, lots of different brands, lots of different identities, and you've got lots of different leaders within those. And this was their identity in their area, and you might have all these different siloed areas. And what we've been working with them to do is, again, the big part of that journey is actually listening to every single person, making them feel part of whatever process you're going through, and then trying to create that into one shared belief that they're all sort of moving towards. And so that journey for First Bus probably took 3-4 years in terms of from the start to getting a brand out into the world. It's been a huge success, and a really exciting one. And they're a great example of a brand that taking sort of an inanimate object and making it have emotion and energy, because it's like people could go, oh, branding buses, that sounds really boring. But I always, when we won the First Bus account, I always said to the team, look what Virgin did for trains. We can do the exact same thing for buses. And thankfully, the great clients at First Bus were really brave and allowed us to do stuff. We were talking early on about one of the examples we did for First Bus, and this was quite a few years ago now. They asked us to launch their new eco-friendly buses. So they said, how do we tell Glasgow, how do we tell Scotland that we've got these new electric buses? And now you could create a really dull poster and say, new electric buses, here's the benefits, here's the features of them. But we persuaded them, I think in the pitch, we actually said, right, close your eyes. And we put little toy buses on their table. And we said, remember when you were a kid and you got a little Hot Wheels car or a bus, and remember the feeling you got. And, I think I said, like, I remember when I got something like that when I was young, I would put this thing beside my bed when I would go to bed so that I would close my eyes. It would be the last thing I see. When I open my eyes, you'd be excited by it. And I did that same sort of stuff with trainers or anything. And I said, how about we create that feeling in real life with a full double-decker bus in a giant toy box and put it in the centre of Glasgow for everyone? And they were like, let's do it. I was like, really? How the fuck are we going to do that? But we figured it out, right? And the powerful thing in doing that was that one of the things I love most about that campaign was that, sometimes people can be like, oh, bus drivers, they can be moody or not, right? Bus drivers are human beings. And what they were lacking at that point was something to be proud of in their brand and in their thing. And by doing that stunt, suddenly the bus drivers were driving everyone around George Square. That's our bus. That's our giant bus in a box. And that made them give great service, made them feel proud of the company they want to be in, and then they feel, they feel part of something, right? Exactly, yeah. And so it's usually just as simple as like trying to find what magic is already there and amplify it.
I guess that kind of the brand name for you as well, MadeBrave, then almost self-selects clients as well, because if they're not willing to be brave with their advertising or their marketing or branding, they're not the right client for you.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
You're getting to work with the ideal client as well, because you set your stall out and you're doing things like cheeky, not peaky, and
exactly. And it allows you to say, look, you've come to MadeBrave. Do you want to be safe or do you want to be brave? And we've actually got like a brave scale. So we're like, you're probably sitting here.
What's your risk profile?
We want to kind of nudge you up here a little bit. And, like I say, bravery is different for everyone. So not everyone needs to be over here. Sometimes it is just a little nudge to do something a little bit out of your comfort zone. And, usually when you do that, it creates attention and,
How do you come up with them? So I think it'd be a good idea to tell us a bit more about the latest campaign for First Bus, which was the one with the train. So tell us how you come up with that idea and who takes credit for it. Is there any ego when doing it, or
any what, sorry?
Ego?
Well, no, I think we one of our values at MadeBrave is amigos without egos, because we always try to create the culture that the best idea can come from anyone, right? It can come from the most junior person, the newest person at the team, most senior. It can come out of the client's mouth. Our job is just to spot it when it appears. And so it shouldn't be a hierarchical thing in terms of who came up with it. But usually there's some people that have the role of spotting them, right? Another great campaign that we did, a different brand this time, a company called Medtronic. They're like a 40 billion turnover healthcare device company. You've never heard of them until you hear of them. You'll see them somewhere now in a hospital or something. They invented the pacemaker. So they created the world's tiniest pacemaker. They also make like diabetic pumps. So if you've got any friends with diabetes, and they've got one of these pumps that connect to your Garmin watch, etc. And we'd been working for them for years, and we worked with the diabetes division. And they said to us, the biggest challenge with people have type 1 diabetes is that they muddle it up with type 2, and they think you don't look after yourself and you eat poorly. And usually that's not the case. Type 1 is just a thing that you get. And so they said, look, we need to kind of raise awareness of the differences. But the challenge here is it's actually really difficult to explain what it's like to have diabetes in the first place, right? And so our brief was, how do we raise awareness, and how do we do that globally on World Diabetes Day? So we want to be able to talk to everyone in any country, any language, cross borders. And we're like, my God, that's an easy brief. But basically, the first part of this is usually listening. So you're trying to find the human truth in it all. So, our team at that point would go off and listen to lots of people who suffer with type 1 diabetes, and hear and listen and look for patterns. And someone in our team came up with the idea that diabetes is one of these things that if you have it, it's invisible, right? So first of all, very difficult to see. But if you imagine I had a blue balloon, right? A balloon up here, and I'm keeping it up in my hand, right? Now, this became a symbol for diabetes that, if I have diabetes, doing everything that you do in normal daily life, but I've got a balloon that I've got to keep up in life, right? Because they're constantly looking at blood sugars, they're constantly, managing their food. And if they drop the balloon, well, it could be fatal because their life could be over. And so it's deadly serious. But this balloon became such an easy symbol of diabetes that it became a metaphor for it. And then it went all around the world. So if like you're listening just now, just Google image diabetes blue balloon and you'll see how much content. We had like Anthony Joshua, like boxing, punching a punching bag while keeping a balloon in the air. We had dancers. We ended up even getting a Guinness World Record for keeping a blue balloon in the air. Big enough. But the great thing about that, once you get something as simple as an idea as that, is, well, it can transcend languages, borders, anything. So we're always trying to get to what's the real human insight that solves the problem, and then how do we get an idea that marries up with that in its simplest form that can scale big or scale small. Easier said than done.
That's amazing. And it sounds like you've got a really good culture. I know you have, and you've spent time working on that. Help me understand how you got to that stage, because you weren't a leader or a manager even when you first set up the company, or didn't have that experience, fair?
No, I didn't. Yeah, absolutely. It's been a learning curve. No, I think I set it out as one of my things that I've always wanted to be good at. And I think, that helped obviously form that into reality in terms of I made it one of my focuses. And so I always thought if I could have a great culture, I truly believe the best brands are built from the inside out, right? Because no matter if you're selling a product or a service, every business is built with people. Now, of course, you've got to get a product market fit, but even if you've got that and you've not got happy people, you're not going to create good stuff. So I always thought if I have happy people make great work. So I always just worked and worked and worked to make the best culture I could. I think usually that's being very clear on a vision, a purpose, set of values, building culture, building brands. It's a lot like building religions, right? There are reasons that they're the kind of rules to the situation you're trying to create. And again, that's a kind of what we're doing when we go in to create brands. I always laugh. I kind of say, like, if you think about Christianity and right, you've got a figurehead, right? You've got a founder, you've got a set of the
senior management team of the 12 disciples.
Well, no, they're the ambassadors. They could be the senior management team. You've got a symbol, you've got, and you've got these stories that you build up, and there's lots of parallels. That's what humans do to build groups, to build tribes and bonds. And what we're trying to do when we build brands or cultures is, I think you said it earlier, is like you're trying to self-select, or choose who self-selects you, right? So you create brands, you create these systems to attract, but also to repel. Because, and that's kind of what I thought when I was building the culture of MadeBrave. We were very visible with it because I thought, I don't want people that are not right for it to come, because it wastes time, money and energy for everyone involved. So I want them to, if they hate it, great, because they've self-selected already before they get there. So I think, that's kind of, again, what you're using these tools, brands and systems for, is to attract and repel.
Was values then, because it's so important to the work you do, was it something that you set out from day one, I want to have this culture and these values in place, or is it just something that kind of evolved over time, that you're like, actually, I'm doing this for other people, I should be a couple of kids, I should better do it for myself?
Yeah, well, no, it's another good question, because it's when's the right moment to do it, and when do you, I think for me personally, when it was in my story, we let the first year of it organically happen, like didn't put form around everything, and just sort of, we're creating momentum, we were creating content on social, stuff was resonating and the company was growing. So I was like, right, something's working, just keep doing what we're doing. And then I think it was the end of year 2, we had the name MadeBrave. We were now like, right, maybe we should stop and try and, because we were still learning branding at that point myself, I was still figuring out all the rules of it. And what we did then was why did you join? What did you like about us? And we listened to all that. And that's really what you're doing in the branding process anyway. And then you're just trying to lay it all out and go like, what are the key themes here? Well, there's definitely a pillar around this. There's something here, there's something here. And you're just trying to build it into a system that then makes sense. And then what a lot of people do is they'll go, well, our values are professionalism, integrity, honesty. And you're kind of like, well, aren't they givens? So you're trying to find things that sort of layer personality so that they're uniquely for your culture and your own place. So like MadeBrave's values are to infinity and beyond, like Buzz, where, you know, we dream big and, you know, think ambitiously. We've got amigos without egos. We've got be your weird self. And like, we've got little stories for each and every one of these, and it's our language. There's a great book out there called Cultish, and it talks about how, you know, everything begins and ends with language. The words we use, how we use them, you know, how we give them to people. And again, back to thinking at the beginning of the MadeBrave, when someone said, I believe in you, like, words are very, very powerful. And when you see successful brands, they almost have cult-like behavior in terms of they have their own way of saying things. And you'll have worked in places where you've got your own language. And people can often think, oh, it's bad. I usually think it's very good, because as long as it's used in a positive way, and of course they could be used negatively, right? And that's the whole idea of that book, Cultish, if you read that. But yeah, you're trying to build your own system. And I love it when I hear people using MadeBraveisms, because I'm like, oh, yeah, something's worked there, because someone has resonated.
I think with values as well, a lot of people, you know, set something that's like, this is what I want, or maybe the owner set out, this is what I want the values to be, and it's not representative of what's in the team. But again, going back to what you're saying about with brands, it's actually speaking to the people within the business and finding out, well, you've already got your own secret language or your own things. So how do you pull that out and draw that out of them and get it to the forefront? Because it's already there. It's just, it's tough though, because I can see how that happens in terms of sometimes it's like, because sometimes I feel like I'm saying something and there's different behavior in the business or a different reality. And it's often, usually in most companies, either the CEO or the founder or whoever's, they often create the spark of it, right? And you usually need a little bit of single-mindedness there, because otherwise it's like when you go off to try and design a Porsche and you ask everyone, what do you want? You say, well, I want it to, you know, lots of fuel. I've got kids. You end up designing this Volvo, right? But you end up with the Homer Simpson.
And you were trying to design a Porsche, and it's the same with a company. It's like, if you ask everyone and take everyone's, you know, input and try and put it together, you do end up with that car. So I think you create the spark, and it's okay sometimes to be creating the vision that you're working towards. So these might not necessarily be the values that everyone perceives we have, but sometimes you're branding ahead of time. So you're saying, we're a company, like, let's just say you're in a company doing 10 million and they're trying to get to 100 million. They've maybe just now rebranding, and they need to revisit their values because they now need a new set of behaviors, because the values really are just the behaviors you want to see in your group of people. So sometimes you're playing back the ones that have been, sometimes it's the ones for the future, and often it might just be a mix of both.
I think it's the balance. If you have just purely aspirational ones, it doesn't resonate. Everyone
feels too disconnected.
So it's got to be that. Yeah. But it kind of ties in with the sort of goal setting, sorry. I was going to say, it's like, you're setting goals. Was that something that you've set out in the business as well? Like, okay, I want to go to this, I want to go to this, or did that just naturally, you kind of grew?
I think, you know, no, every year we always try and do okay, here's next year's plan, and here's some goals and some pillars that we're going to work to, and, you know, themes for the year. And often that's, you're trying to fix something that maybe isn't working at the moment. You know, so yeah, there's a constant year reset, and I think that's generally how most businesses work. And then you're just trying to track along those goals, but they don't always come to fruition, unfortunately. I
think you'd be surprised at how few businesses set goals as well.
So it's not all plain sailing all the time. Tell us about some of the bumps in the road that maybe you've experienced.
Yeah, no, I think it's good to talk about that, because I think it's, you hear podcasts like this and you're all right, I'll go and try that. That sounds easy, and it's absolutely not easy, because I think we see the front end on LinkedIn, we see the front end, you know, out in the world, and I think the true reality of it is that, you know, entrepreneurship, running a business, is full of challenges. And, you know, once you're in it, it's like you're in it. Like, so, you know, I always trying to share that it comes with many ups and downs, and I think as well, it's important to raise that entrepreneurship's not for everyone either. You know, I think sometimes today it feels like everyone should be hustling and becoming an entrepreneur, but actually for a lot of people, being in a job is okay. And if you're listening just now and you're happy in a 9 to 5, that's all right for some people, because entrepreneurs need people like that as well, and that makes a happy ecosystem. And for some people, freelance might be the right thing. Might be you not having a team. And, and then some people having teams is right as well. But I could tell you millions of stories of when things have gone wrong. They're constantly going wrong. There's and I think you've got to kind of have resilience. I think most people that I've seen that have tried to create a successful business but haven't got there, it's just they usually give up just a little bit too soon. It's usually just around the corner, it's just a little bit higher, and you've just got to kind of keep getting out of bed, even when the days are tough. And I've had millions of days, tears in my eyes, not want to go in there, not want to do it, having to do difficult things. And, it often forces you into situations where, the market's changed, the client hasn't paid something, and then that forces an action, to real life human beings. So, yeah, it's not easy.
And you started off in the East End of Glasgow, and you moved recently into centre of Glasgow, is that right? Social Hub.
Yeah.
So tell me why that happened and how you've made that move.
Yeah, so I think, how many offices have I had? we moved, I think we were moving like once a year for many years. And 2019, we moved into a space in the East End of Glasgow, 7,000 square foot. It was like my dream studio. It was everything I'd ever envisioned. It had a bar. It had, breakout spaces, photography studio, videography studio in there. And I think we spent £300,000 on a fit out, saved all that money into the office. We're like, right, let's get all of our clients, all of our friends, family. We had a famous band come and play. We projection mapped on the side of the building. It felt like a real arrival moment. I was like, this is going to be our year. And then 30 days later, my ops director was like, I think we should look at this thing in China, this pandemic thing. And I was like, what? Nah, nothing's the, I don't know about you. Like, I'm one of these people who don't watch the news because he's the one that watches the news and he brings me up to speed with anything. And he said, no, we should look at that. And next minute, obviously, I think the STV, he decided, he said, why don't we split the teams into three? Send anyone vulnerable home completely, and we'll have two other teams and we'll rotate. And this is before we all had Teams and, Zoom and all these, tech. We're like, that sounds like a good idea. And someone, STV picked up on it and they put us on STV. And I think this was day one, pandemic news. And it was like, MadeBrave has ingenious workaround for pandemic. And then I think day two, the whole world was told to go home, right? So we're then at home and I was like, oh my God, I've just invested in that office and all of this stuff. And then obviously the pandemic played itself out. And so I'd signed a 10-year lease on that space, which was really good in hindsight. And yeah, it got to 5 years and I had a break. You often get a break in the middle of your lease. And I had a year to pay notice on that. And when that was up, I was trying to figure out, do I keep the office? Do I not? And, I always think it's quite important. Place is quite important in a business in terms of the physical environment you put people in has a real impact to how they show up. And so I was like, I don't want to give this up. But then, people weren't coming in the office in the same way. And so I got invited to Amsterdam by the Social Hub. I had no idea who the Social Hub were. I now know them very, very well. And they're founded by a Scottish founder, a guy called Charlie McGregor, super cool guy. And he has 17 of these social hubs all around Europe. So they started off life as the student hotel. It was his dad's business. He took it over and rebranded, etc. And when I got to Amsterdam, I was like, oh my God, you've designed the future of working. It's really amazing. So it's basically a hotel. So you've got really interesting international travelers. You've got students. So in Glasgow, I think there's 150 students. There's some people seeking asylum in the building. There's then auditorium, event spaces, workshop rooms, a gym, a bar, a rooftop bar that's about to open. And then layered on top of that, you've got co-working and office spaces. And so I said to Charlie, let me come in there and let me be your anchor tenant in Glasgow. I said, I've got this situation with my lease. And he said, let's do it. So I signed the first lease in the Social Hub and literally been in there for a year. And it's the most amazing thing because it's like, I always believe that, in business, a lot of business comes from luck. But you need to put yourself in a position to get lucky. And what I kind of realized that I hadn't quite realized with the office out in the East End was I'd built myself like a big office, but there was nobody to collide with. There was nothing else happening. Stuff was meant to happen, but the pandemic set that all back. And when I got into the social hub and I see all these collisions happening, if you imagine you've got those travelers colliding with business people, colliding with students, colliding with people that are in for events, there's way more chance of getting lucky in that situation. So, so it's been we loved it, great success, and yeah, super cool place.
And was there any point at COVID you just thought, oh, I just want to pack it in?
So many times. I mean, I honestly think I've got PTSD from the COVID, from the trying to keep a team fed and paid and all of those things.
It's not just you at that stage, it's 50, 60, 70 other people.
And then everyone gets
responsible for
people,
it.
and like in a business like mine, because it's service-based, you couldn't just put everyone on furlough, because if you put everyone on furlough, when they came back off furlough, there'd be no jobs, because you need to keep winning jobs. So we had a really fine balance to try and pull people off, to try and save a bit of money, still trying to bring in income, still trying to make the whole thing happening. And I was like, I would like furlough, please. But it's the hard bit again. And when you lead the thing, well,
Fuck stops with you.
You're there, you got to do it. And it was a terrible time. I mean, and so many businesses in different forms, so many businesses failed, so many people had personal issues as well. And I think we all had all of that swirling around. So it's weird that it's kind of happened now, isn't it? It's kind of,
What kept you going? Was it back? It kind of almost brings it full circle to that nature versus nurture. It's like that nurture of your mum Maureen, like building that resilience. Is that what keeps you going on? Or?
Yeah, I think you just got to, haven't you? There's no other choice. And I think I saw that with her bringing me up. Single parent, deaf. She had no other choice. So she worked night shift as a nurse. So I was like, Jesus Christ. When I think back to what she did, 3 children, she's working night shift, can't hear a thing, coming back, and she just got on with it. And I think there's a lot to learn from that kind of grit. And when
you become a parent, it totally changes, doesn't it? Your perspective of your own parents.
You're like, oh my God, you're like, I wish I'd been a bit kinder when I was a kid or when I was a teenager. And and
there's a couple other, I don't know if side projects is the right way to look at it. You got your little, is it your bothy in your garden? That was
that was during the pandemic.
A labour of love during COVID, wasn't it?
Well, that was actually the people, a great company called Story & Co, who built the MadeBrave office during the pandemic. As you can imagine, offices were now not getting built and designed, so they really cleverly pivoted to create these little garden pods like bothy, little black bothy. And they persuaded me to buy the first one, and I said, right, well, I'll post about it to help the business start. And I think we put it on LinkedIn, the first picture, and it got 2.6 million views. And like every second comment was, who made these? And I was like, I wish I was on commission for these, So, but obviously set their thing off great, and their design was amazing. So, I spent a lot of time in there. I do a podcast from in there when I do that, and then it's been been lucky to be able to have that, I suppose. So.
And Finn, let's talk about Finn and TikTok work there. So how did that all start? Was it just an idea one night between the two of you, or?
Yeah, so I think in pandemic as well, I was like most people, stir crazy, and I was just needing a creative output. So TikTok blew up in the pandemic. If you remember, that's when it sort of birthed itself. And so my son, Finn, this is the baby that was 2 weeks old. He's now obviously the same age as MadeBrave, so 13 now. But what's that in the pandemic? How many years ago was that? 5? So 8. So he was 8. And so I said, let's download that, let's play with this. And for no other reason, just playing it, just creating fun content together. I've got this in my garden. I dug a trampoline in the garden, right? It took me days. It was the worst 3 days of my life. I had blisters over my little soft keyboard hands, a nightmare. And beside it, I built like calisthenics bars, so like pull-up bars, just for doing weights and stuff, pandemic. And one day Finn was like, Dad, come and watch me do this. And he'd sort of stood on these 2 fence posts, and he would swing and he would jump on the trampoline. He would do a flip off it, and then he'd walk backwards. And I was like, wait a minute, what? And so I said, let me film that. And I filmed it. And I said, Finn, this is going to go instantly viral if I reverse it. So I put it in reverse, and it looked mad because he walked off backwards, which made it look like he walked forwards. It'll make sense when I'll show you after. Basically, this first video got 14 million views, and everyone was in the comments saying, it's in reverse, not in reverse, it is in reverse, not in reverse. And usually the clue to your next viral video, any video you ever make, is usually in the insights and the comments of below. The other thing people were saying were, never let them know your next move, which was a trend at the time, doing random stuff. Or they were saying, Bros a Tiny Spider-Man. So I said, right, Amazon Prime, Spider-Man outfit, Finn, put that on. Let's do the exact same thing. We'll title it Never Let Them Know Your Next Move. And we'll do the exact same thing. And it got 72 million views, which I think, when I looked up, I think it was the 7th most watched reel in the world that year. And basically, as I said, we've got a very narrow moment of time where there's a lot of eyeballs on our page. Let's just test stuff and try stuff, see what resonates. So we started creating content. We're trying all this reverse content because we thought that might be the thing they love. And then we very quickly realized that they liked the father-son relationship. And I thought, well, this is a win because, I get to spend some time with him. I get to teach him how to be creative, get to teach him about business and just the fun of it. And so we started creating all this content. And then the video started to, go and go and go. And then we were going on holiday and I wanted to buy a decent camera to take with me. And I bought this Insta360 camera. It's an amazing camera that allows you to capture full 360 and then post-production you can edit, all these creative ways. I took this on holiday on a beach holiday that we were on, and all these videos started getting like 1 million, 2 million, 5 million views. And the company that owns the cameras reached out. We've seen your videos, love them. We want to sponsor you. So they started sponsoring us. Other brands started sponsoring us. And then one day they said, Andrew, can we have the rights to this video? We're going to have Will Smith react to your video and recreate your video. And I was like, what? Will Smith? Like the Will Smith? I'm like, yeah. And so one day we wake up and there's Will Smith on our feed. He's sitting watching one of our videos, and then Will Smith recreates one of our videos and he shares that across all his channels. And so since then, we've just been on this kind of journey, just making content together. And, it's good fun because I bring Finn on to any of the business calls and he learns all that stuff. So he knows all this stuff he doesn't know that he yet knows, if that makes sense. And for me, it's just the fulfilling part of, spending time with my son and being creative. And yeah.
You just look like you're having such good fun.
They're good fun. Good fun.
So what's next for MadeBrave then?
Well, just, we just won an exciting client at the moment. So just, we've got some big campaigns coming soon. I can't tell you much more than that, but there'll be some stuff coming out soon. And just enjoy the time at Social Hub, and the rooftop bar is going to be opening soon. So I think spend some time up there if I can. Excellent.
So we always finish the podcast by asking you, what's your guiding principle in business?
Yeah, well, I think I've always, the sort of purpose of MadeBrave is a lot of aligned to my own purpose. And, we've always had this line, the inspire creativity and bravery in everyone we come across. And I always just say to the team, don't go into a boardroom, don't go into a stage, don't go anywhere, don't try to sell anything, just go in and try and inspire creativity. And so that's what I try and do. Hopefully what I've done today, and if I've done my job right, then someone listening might just be inspired by one thing that sets them off on a path to be more creative or more brave.
Brilliant, Andrew. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.